Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for your attention, and now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the
Welcome to our top travel destinations. I am your host, Kevin Flanagan. I have been editor of the weekly travel news column in the Sunday Independent and the Fine Wine and Food Guide, and I am here to use my decades of experience to help you know exactly where to stay, eat, drink, shop, and explore when visiting the world's top travel destinations. So sit back and enjoy the wonders of travel as we take off on our magical journey together. Welcome to the top travel destinations, and I am looking at the Dolomites in Italy. Yes, it's a UNESCO mountain range, which I had the privilege and the pleasure of visiting. And I'm going to ask the question and see if I can answer is, are these the greatest mountain ranges in the world? Do they actually give, as many poets and writers have said, a glimpse of heaven? I'm not a stranger to great mountain ranges. And what is it about the mountains? Well, again, we go back to our poets and philosophers. They literally reach up to heaven. There's no pollution there. And they're virgin white, covered in snow. There's something that appeals in some sort of great archetypal way to the human condition. We all want to climb a mountain when we see it. We all want to get the view and stand there and look down on the rest of the world. So it is a real privilege to go and hike, sometimes to the bottom, and I visited the top of some mountains. Last year, I had the privilege of seeing the greatest mountain, well, certainly the tallest mountain of them all, Mount Everest, when I visited Nepal, went to Kathmandu, and flew over Everest. Can you believe it? It is really something else. And in that range, that huge range in the Himalayas, I think there's three of the tallest mountains, all pretty much standing next to one another. You can catch them if you fly over in a plane. I've been to an extraordinary mountain, Mont Blanc in France, where I had the pleasure of taking a small four-seater plane driven by a lunatic French military pilot who now ran this little company, and we flew. He did a very nasty trick. If you ever go to Mont Blanc and you go to Megève and you pay your 150 euros for a seat in his four-seater rickety old bucket of a plane, he flew up. And there were two other lady journalists making up the four. And to impress them, our wonderful pilot took us up to the very top, just below the peak of Mont Blanc, and then he lifted the plane up. It was hit by the headwinds, and we nearly tumbled to the ground. He got a great laugh out of this, while the rest of us tried to hold our stomachs. But we did see the top of Mont Blanc. We did see this extraordinary, wonderful wild animal sitting on the top of the mountain, the wonderful, rugged horned deer that is the emblem of the mountain. And there it was, minding its own business when we flew over, and it got up and did a buck lep to get away from us. I've also sat under the Eiger, maybe the most dangerous mountain in Europe. There's a restaurant you can go to right up in the mountains. You look over and you sip your wine and eat your starter as the sun sets behind the Eiger. So an interesting tale here is that with the Eiger, when the avalanche happens, they get a few minutes warnings, and the chef and everybody else has to actually ski down the mountain for their lives, which they've done several times because the car won't work. There's too much snow. So it was with great excitement that I went to Val di Fassa in the Dolomites in Trentino. We'd flown into Venice. We traveled the 60 kilometers northeast to the Pera di Fassa. It's in Trento. Near to Val di Fassa is Monzon, and there's a tiny population there. And immediately I was taken with these Dolomites. Now, the Dolomites only form 1% of the Alps, but they're younger. They're completely different. And they have this limestone rock, which gives them a different color, sort of a golden color. It's quite extraordinary. You also have, as I'll describe at the end of this short podcast, a different geography and a different geology to them. So you get this very particular mountains rising 15 to 2,000 meters straight up, covered in snow, and below the tree line. And there's 4 basic types of pine that surrounds the base of these extraordinarily beautiful mountain ranges. And the Dolomites really do give, in my opinion, a glimpse of heaven. There's so much to do. In winter, of course, you can ski, which we did. You can go shoe snowing, which you put these sort of tennis rackets on your feet and you tread up with a guide. You'd have to have a guide. You'd soon get lost and you'd soon run into serious trouble. And our guide, extraordinary gentleman, Gia, he told us how people get lost in the mountains, particularly in the summer months. They get lost in the Dolomites, they run out of water, they get heat exhaustion, they get a little bit of altitude sickness because it's going up to 3,000. And it is the most extraordinary possibility of running into danger. But that's not all you can do. If you go with a guide, as I always recommend on these podcasts, you'll be wonderfully well looked after. But you've also got tobogganing. You've got cross-country, which I'm going to try the next time. You have opportunities to trek during the summer months. If you've had your fill of ski activities and snow activities in the winter, in the summer and in the spring and in the autumn, you get these opportunities to hike, to mountain walk. In the autumn, you'll see one of the 4 types of pine goes golden as the leaves change, and you get this golden blanket. Can you imagine it? So you can hike, you can do your swimming in the lakes, boating in the lakes, cycling. There's no end to the activities. There's a huge emphasis on wellness. Right across the Dolomite region, you've got some fantastic refuges, which are these sort of little hotels up in the mountains where you can hike to. They can be very basic, where you can just have a dorm and share rooms, right through to places that I've done a recent podcast on, which is where you will actually stay in a Michelin-starred, the Refugio Fuggini, which is just outside of Pellegrino, right up in the mountains. And that in itself is an absolute treat. But it really doesn't matter where you go or where you stay. You will be surrounded in this region of the Dolomites by the most extraordinary summer, winter activities. Remember, these, when you go to places like Saspodoi, which is the ultimate viewpoint, and people cycle there, they get the lifts up because many of the gondolas are open, there's slow walking, and places like the Saspodoi, which were built as a pass between Bolzano and Cortina. This is where you will find the riders from the Giro d'Italia laboring up these numerous dozens of bends. We've been up there in a coach and in a taxi. What I would recommend, if you suffer from motion sickness, which I do, you take some medication before you go, and that means you won't end up sort of feeling really, really sick. And it's quite high as well. So you can hike, you can climb. Some of the regions we were in this Extros, they're absolutely wonderful mountains we were skiing around, and our guide and our ski guide, they pointed to the mountains, and many of which have paths you can walk. You don't have to climb. It's extraordinary just how much the activities are. And then, of course, the Dolomite has its own wonderful culinary tradition. So you have food, the venison, the hare, the dough, if you're into those sort of things, and the local wines are to die for. So much to see and so much to do. And when we were there was the Ski Jazz Festival. So when we were up in the mountains, you had wonderful musicians playing as you sit and having your lunch and look out onto the mountains climbing up above you. And then you can go down in the gondola and listen to some world-class jazz. I really was blown away. But it really comes back to this, the Dolomites World Heritage Property, this protected series of highly distinctive mountain landscapes, which have really exceptional natural beauty. They have this real unique combination of earth science values that have made them studied by geologists from around the world. It's the quantity, the concentration of this highly varied limestone formations is unique in the global context. And there's areas where now that the geologists study the remains of the marine life from particularly from the Jurassic period, after what was the greatest extinction event in the history of life when the asteroid hit the earth. The dinosaurs died, and there is great in these sublime monumental landscapes of the Dolomites, there is actually rich scientific and artistic remains that people just love to come, whether they are a top geologist, an artist, a poet, or a skier, or bring your family. So, in answer to this, I just found there was something about the Dolomites that sort of haunts the memory. I don't know, there's some sort of intrinsic beauty from these amazing vertical forms, these pinnacles and spires and towers, these unique little mountain forms, that these horizontal surfaces that just reach up to the sky, the crags, the legs, the plateaus. They just abruptly arrive above the gentle foothills. They leap out from these four forms of ferns that surround the base, and they just glitter in the sun. And you can watch them in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. Sometimes the clouds come across, it's true, and there's snow and there's rain. But when the clouds disappear, I actually believe, as you stand there, whichever part of the Dolomites you're in, and look up, and below you are the beautiful fields, either covered in snow or green grass, the lakes, the fern trees. And then you look up and you see these jagged fingers, broken, cracked, actually sculpted by the air and the winds and the rain and the snow and the ice. And they actually touch heaven. So go to the Dolomites, because you will get a glimpse of the divine.